Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules podcast. This is episode 50, and this will be our Round 23 preview episode, running through all 9 matches of Round 23 of the AFL season 2024. Things are heating up. Couple teams look like they're done. Couple teams hanging by the skin of their teeth. And a few teams trying to push for that top 4 spot on the ladder. Well, as always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. All interactions are helpful, whether you're on Spotify or YouTube. They're all helpful. Also, plenty of videos go live on YouTube, hopefully every week. This week there was no extras, but most weeks we will be posting extra videos, especially heading into finals and award season of the AFL. So go check all of that out, plus all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above, plenty of content. Thanks for tuning in, and let's jump straight into the first match of this weekend's football. It's Friday night football. It's the Bombers Swans. It's a big game. Bombers sitting 10th on the ladder, still can make finals. They probably need to win both. They certainly need to win at least one, but probably need to win both of them. And they're not going to be easy. They've got Sydney this week, and I think they follow that up with Brisbane in Brisbane to finish the season. Sydney, meanwhile, they're first on the ladder. They've had a little bit of a rough little period, but they got the win last week just to steady themselves, and maybe they'll be enough to get themselves a little bit of confidence back and heading into finals. As always, we'll have a quick look at the teams as they've just been announced. The Bombers have 2 changes. They have Archie Perkins and Sam Wiedemann coming in. Going out is Nick Cox and Alwyn Davey Jr. For the Swans, Lewis Milliken and Corey Warner coming in. Out, big out here, Chad Warner, who was one of the 2 reasons why Sydney ended up getting over the line over Collingwood last week. It was him and Isaac Heaney show in that last quarter, and this week, Chad Warner goes out, so that's a big out for them. Also out is Robbie Fox. We'll jump straight into the rest of the matchup here. Looking at the history of these 2 teams, they did meet in round 2 or 3 or 4, somewhere early on in the season. Sydney won it by 30 points, but it was up at the SCG, so it wasn't the most convincing win of their season up there. But nonetheless, it was a win. They played last year just the once. That was down here at Marvel Stadium, where this match is going to be. Sydney won it by 2 points. The year before was at the MCG. Bombers won that one. But over the last few years, Sydney definitely have the better record between these two. They've won 5 of the last 6. Probably not all that surprising. Sydney have probably been the better team consistently over those years. Sydney making the grand final 2 years ago, obviously. Essendon making the finals in 2021, just. But yeah, so that's where these 2 match up. Bombers, you'd have to think their season's pretty much done, but it's feasible that they make finals, so they'll be keen to come out and show a bit more than they did last week. Even though they only lost after the siren, it was not the best performance from them, let's be honest. Poor kicking in the last quarter certainly cost them, but that's part of football. You've got to kick straight to win games. Comparing the 2 teams, Sydney's numbers still look pretty good, seeing they've been so ordinary over the last 7 weeks. Forward efficiency and defensive efficiency is still a massive concern for the Bombers, and will probably continue to be. Sydney are definitely better than them at that area. The one area that the Bombers are really good at is territory battle, and that's an area that Sydney's also very good at, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, who can dominate that field position. Sydney have played a few games at Marvel, and they haven't been spectacular, but they've won most of them. I think the only one they've lost this year was St Kilda, if I'm correct. But overall, they've beaten some good teams there. So I think they beat the Bulldogs there. They possibly beat somebody else. Maybe, I can't remember. But, you'd have to think, on numbers, Sydney will win this. But it's a crazy season. Sydney didn't play that well last week. They were atrocious 2 weeks ago. So the door's open there for the Bombers to sneak through this one. And if they win this and all of a sudden have a game at the Gabba against Brisbane to make finals where you just can never know. You can't write it off. There's been plenty of twists and turns this season, and what's one more crazy one? Clearances pretty level across both teams. Uncontested football goes the Bombers' way more than likely here. Sydney not the most. They're still pretty good in uncontested footy and winning that area of the game, but they don't dominate it like the Bombers do most weeks. Contested footy, neither team especially great at it. Tackling, both teams are really good tackling teams. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Sydney did beat the previously number one ranked tackling team in tackles last week in Collingwood. So wouldn't think that will be an issue for them here. And the turnover game, the Bombers are definitely better than Sydney. But it turns out that Sydney don't care because they've won 15 out of 21 games. Their season's still pretty damn good. They're sitting first on the ladder. And it's hard to see them not finishing top two now that they won last week. If they had lost last week, it would have been a very big danger sign. But they got the win, so that's all that really matters in the end. Chad Warner out, massive out that one. Will be interesting to see how it plays out. Heaney's obviously still in. He was great last week. Goulden had a bit of a down week, but he did kick the match winner. So he'll be looking to bounce back this week. I feel like that's been a little bit like his whole season, really, Errol Goulden. He's played some absolute ripper games, but he's had some games where he's just not had much impact at all. So that's game one, Friday Night Football. As you can see, predicted score does actually have the Bombers winning, so that will be interesting to say the least. Game number 2 of the weekend. We've got Gold Coast Suns v the Melbourne Demons. This is up on the Gold Coast. 1:45 kickoff on Saturday afternoon. The teams have been announced. We've got Touk Miller coming in for Alex Sexton for the Gold Coast Suns. For Melbourne, it's Jake Bowie coming in for Clayton Oliver. So a big out for the Demons. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to cover that. You just have to think that Gold Coast win this one comfortably. Neither team got much to play for. 12th, 13th. Technically, the Suns can still make finals. They're not going to though. So we'll see what happens there, but they're just not going to. And Melbourne, their season has fallen apart. I think they've lost their last 4 games. They were a chance for finals 4 weeks ago, but in the end, they've just fallen apart. When they beat the Bombers, it looked like their season might still have a little bit of a sniff, but as it turns out, not really. They were okay last week against the Power, but that was in Melbourne. This is up on the Gold Coast. Gold Coast have only lost one game at home this year, and that was their last one against the Lions, where they got beaten quite comfortably. But Brisbane are a team that obviously plays in Queensland a lot, so probably the most used to those sort of conditions that you typically get up there. This is also an early kickoff though, so it's probably not going to be as slippery as most games on the Gold Coast, unless it rains, which I haven't looked at the weather forecast, but we'll see how that plays out. Typically, previous years, Melbourne have been one of the worst wet weather teams in the league, so that probably doesn't bode well for them, although they have been pretty good in the wet this year. They did beat the Bombers, and I think they've beaten someone else in the wet as well this year, so it's probably the best they've looked in wet weather football for many years. They just don't score enough. They defend pretty well, Melbourne, but it's probably not going to be enough here. Gold Coast are just another beast up on the Gold Coast. They finally won an away game last week, so they're going to have their confidence up. Obviously, neither team playing for much other than draft picks, so a loss doesn't really matter to either team. Clearances will go the way of Gold Coast. Melbourne are second worst clearance team in the competition. Contested footy probably goes Melbourne, but only just. uncontested footy, neither team are great at it. Although Gold Coast do get a lot more uncontested football at home than they do away, so you'd probably put it towards them on here. Melbourne, good tackling team and a good turnover team. Gold Coast, a very good turnover team. Also, as you can see, predicted score on the screen suggests a reasonably comfortable victory for Gold Coast Suns. Game number 3 of the weekend, starting at the same time in Sydney, is GWS Fremantle at NG Stadium. Massive game for both teams. GWS on a bit of a hot spell. They beat Brisbane in Brisbane last week. They just keep getting over the line against teams that probably outplay them for major chunks of the games, but somehow GWS just get the job done. Early season they were getting the job done by playing better football than their opponents, whereas recently it's been more they've just been getting over the line, just doing what they need to do, and they did that again last week against Brisbane. Fremantle, their season's on the line here. They've dropped down to 6th. 2 weeks ago they looked like they were a very good chance for top 4. They've lost 2 games in a row, one against the Bombers, which was lost in the last couple minutes of the game, and then obviously last week against Geelong over at home they lost. So their season's on the line here. They need to win this. They don't want to be relying on beating Port Adelaide in Port Adelaide next week, because they will also need some results to potentially go their way depending on what other results happen this weekend. But it's been an interesting few weeks for them. Looking at the teams for both teams, how they've been named. Don't know what I was saying there, but we'll carry on. GWS have Toby McMullen, Kieran Briggs and Stephen Caniglio coming in. Going out are Harvey Thomas, Xavier O'Halloran and Max Grueski. For Fremantle, we got Liam Reedy and Nathan O'Driscoll coming in. Going out is Matt Taberner and Carl Warner. Liam Reedy is playing his debutant game, so good luck to him. Where's this game won and lost? Fremantle are the number 1 clearance team, but they haven't been great in the clearance game of late. They've been winning it most weeks still, but that number's been dropping quite considerably by how much they've been winning it by, and it's been showing in the results, to be honest. It's probably the number 1 area that their game's dropping at the moment. Defensively, they're the number 1 team in the competition. Offensively, they're 9th, so they're pretty good still. They just, especially early season, struggled to score, whereas not so much in the second half of the year, but obviously the last couple of weeks haven't been great. They do that through forward and defensive efficiency. They're just a team that when they get it inside 50, they create opportunities really well, and defensively, when the opposition goes forward, they don't concede easy opportunities. Same can be said for GWS. They're pretty good at both areas as well, so it'll be interesting to see how this game plays out. I think it's weird because GWS's numbers don't look great. They're not a good clearance team. They don't dominate the territory battle, and they also don't win the turnover game all that well. So that kind of tells you that, I guess, where do they get their scores from? And it's just grinding it out, really, and being efficient when they do, especially defensively. Whereas Fremantle dominate the clearance game, don't dominate the territory battle. They do turn it over a fair bit, but they do dominate that clearance game, which is where they try and get the ball forward and create good opportunities through that area. Contested footy, both teams are very good. GWS are the best uncontested team in the competition, and Fremantle are 3rd. So there's a good chance that the team that controls the uncontested footy will win this game, because both teams are pretty good at pressure, especially GWS. So if Fremantle can, I guess, negate that and actually win the uncontested footy, GWS will find it very hard to stop them. However, the alternative is also true. If GWS can control this tempo and the ball a bit, Fremantle just won't be in this match at all. There's no two ways about that, I don't think. projected scores there. Fremantle winning it by 4 points, but it could go either way, this one. Fremantle obviously have been to New South Wales once already this year when they played Sydney, and they did beat them there. So it'll be interesting to see how this game plays out. Next up, we have the grand final rematch, Collingwood-Brisbane, at the MCG, 4:35 kickoff. Collingwood season probably over. Technically, they can make it. They need to win both games and get a few results to go their way, but it's feasible, but unlikely. Brisbane, they're fifth on the ladder. 2 wins here, one against Collingwood, and then if they finish with a win against the Bombers, top 4 beckons. They're fifth on the ladder, so technically they might need a little bit of luck, but 2 wins almost certainly should put them in the top 4, which would be a huge result after their first half of the season. They've only had 1 loss since the bye, which is incredible from them. The teams for this game, Collingwood have Will Parker coming in, Joe Richards going out. For Brisbane Lions, they have Harry Sharp and Eric Hipwood coming in, going out Jackson Pryor and Henry Smith. Collingwood last week did everything but win the game up until 5 minutes into the third final quarter. They were 20-something points up, looking like they were going to cruise to the win. They fell apart a bit and Sydney ran over the top of them, which is kind of a story of their season. Brisbane, they lost one last week. They were going really well up until that point. There's an argument that they probably should have won. They kicked poorly in front of goal. They created a lot of opportunities. They dominated a lot of stats and a lot of areas of the game, but they just couldn't convert it into goals, I guess, in the end, and that certainly cost them. Might cost them a top 4 spot if they lose to Collingwood here. Then that loss last week will be very costly. However, it's a stretch. We'll see who wins, but you'd think Brisbane should win it. They're probably going a lot better than Collingwood right now. It is at the MCG though, so we'll see how it is. Also, Brisbane will probably be pretty fired up to win this one. They obviously lost the grand final last year to Collingwood at the MCG, and then Collingwood also beat them up in Brisbane in round 3 or 4, I think it was, earlier this year. So they got a lot on the line in many ways here. The Lions, Collingwood's forward efficiency is still massively better than everyone at the moment. They're flying in that area. They don't win the territory. They don't win too many stats other than tackles. Early season they were winning interceptions, but not so much anymore. And forward efficiency. The defensive efficiency has dropped off a little bit over the last couple of weeks, so they'll be pretty keen, I reckon, to tighten up that defense a little bit, because their defense has actually been pretty good considering how much territory they've given up, certainly in the back half of this season. But they just, the last couple of weeks, have kind of fallen away in that area a little bit. Brisbane, they're just good across the board. They've got decent efficiency now, especially seeing early season that was where they were struggling the most. But they dominate the territory battle. They're really good in clearances. They're good in contested footy. They're good in interceptions, turnovers. The only stat that they're not good at, really, is their tackle differential. They're the lowest tackle differential team in the competition. But it doesn't tend to hurt them too much because they are the number 1 contested ball winners. So when the ball's in the contest, they do tend to win the ball. So it's hard to tackle the opposition if you have the ball. Projected score there, Brisbane by 9, according to this, 84.7 to 75.4. You'd think that more on the line for them. They'll come out and should win this one, I think. Next up, we have Saturday night football, and it's the showdown. Port Adelaide. Big game for Port Adelaide. Not so much for Adelaide, but I mean every showdown's very important for them. They would love to ruin Port Adelaide's party and maybe ruin their top 4 chances. Port Adelaide sitting second, but they could still finish as low as 7th or so if they lose both games here. So a very important game for them. The teams have been announced. Ryan Burton coming in for Todd Marshall for Port Adelaide. for Adelaide Crows. Lachlan Gollan coming in for Tex Walker. So big change there. What do we make of this match? Everything points towards Port Adelaide just being too good. Adelaide did beat them earlier this season, but Port Adelaide wasted a lot of opportunities that day. So I don't know. I'm not super confident in Port Adelaide, but at the same time, I just don't see a way that Adelaide win it. However, they did beat Bulldogs last week, so I guess it shouldn't be the biggest surprise of all time if they do manage to win it. Port Adelaide's numbers have been really good, certainly in the second half of the season. Disposal efficiency solid, inside 50 territory is really good. Forward and defensive efficiency outstanding, second and third in the competition. Clearances they're really good at. The one area they don't really do well at is contested football, but neither do Adelaide, so you'd kind of put that maybe neutral, but maybe Port Adelaide win it. We'll see what happens here. Tackling they're good at, and turnover game they're not bad. They're better than Adelaide, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well, I guess. Adelaide, their season's done. It's just a matter of whether they finish 13, 14, 15, depending on other results here. They can't go any further down than 15th, but they could potentially jump one, maybe two spots, I think. They probably won't want to, but at the same time, they won't want to lose a showdown. So they'll come into this fight up, and with all hopes of ruining Port Adelaide's top four chances. They would love nothing more, I don't reckon, in Adelaide Crowland than hurting Port Adelaide's season, because Port Adelaide, technically, from what we've seen over the last 6 weeks, are probably one of the best teams in the competition at the moment, and certainly look like a genuine chance if they make top four. I know that they have their recent history of perhaps falling apart a bit in finals, but you got to be in it to win it, and certainly being in the top four is better than being in 5th, 8th. There's no doubt about that. Next game up is game number 6 of the weekend. It's St Kilda Geelong, rematch of the 2009 Grand Final. However, this one's at the Marvel Stadium. Saturday night, coming in for St Kilda is Hugo Garcia for Angus McLennan. And for Geelong, they've got Mitch Nevitt and Gary Rowan coming in. Going out is Zach Tui and Tanner Bruin. St Kilda season has been hit and miss all year. I mean, they're 9-12, so it's not the worst season of all time. They will certainly be kicking themselves for letting the first half of the season get away from them, I guess, because they've certainly shown signs that they're good enough. They've had some big wins. They've also had some really bad losses, like a couple of weeks ago against Brisbane. Meanwhile, Geelong, their season's really starting to get going again. They're 4-1 over the last 5 weeks. They went to Perth last week and beat Fremantle, which puts them into 4th position on the ladder. 2 weeks to go. Win them both. They finish top 4. Second chance. Even potentially top 2 is still on the cards for them, depending on what other teams do. This is a huge game for them. They don't play Marvel too often, so it's not going to be the easiest challenge for them. But if they do manage to win this one against St Kilda, all of a sudden, they'll be looking at top 4, and they'll be dangerous. They won the premiership obviously 2 years ago. They started the season obviously very hot. They won their first 7 games. They then hit a bit of a rough patch, but they've really turned it around of recent. What does St Kilda need to do to upset that? Do they want to upset that? I don't know. Obviously playing same time as Adelaide, who are probably the 2 teams that are most likely to switch in that bottom 8 in terms of positions, with St Kilda 14th, Adelaide 15th. You'd have to say Geelong go in as favourites, comfortable favourites, but that Marvel Stadium does worry me slightly, and also predicted score has come out St Kilda winning it by 2 points or 1.6 points. So it's not out of the realms of possibility. I think St Kilda's best is good enough. They haven't shown it enough this year. Geelong probably have a lot more to play for, but you never know. St Kilda might be able to ruin another party. It won't be the first one they have done this year, and it might be their last chance to ruin a party. So we'll see what happens there. I think Geelong's domination in the turnover game has been their strongest point all year, and that's probably where St Kilda struggle the most. So it'll be important, I guess, how that plays out here. For a team that isn't great at disposal efficiency in Geelong, the fact that they do dominate the turnover game every week is quite a very good effort. In fact, clearances, neither team's great. Contested footy will probably go the way of St Kilda, which means maybe the tackle count goes the way of Geelong. But if Geelong can control that turnover game, I guess, and not turn it over too much, but also force St Kilda into a lot of turnovers, which they have been known to do, Geelong should be too good. But will that happen? Nobody knows. Your guess is as good as mine. We'll see. We'll see, I guess, on Saturday night. We head on to Sunday football. 3 important games, but you would think that the favourites win them all. First up, we got Bulldogs, North Melbourne, Marvel Stadium. Bulldogs 7th on the ladder, fighting. They need to win at least one of their 2 games, probably both, to seal top 8 spot and a spot in September. They get a pretty decent crack at it here. North Melbourne, not the toughest opposition. They have been a lot better in the second half of the year, but they've still not been spectacular. Whereas the Bulldogs, outside of last week, have been really good for the last 5 or so weeks. Last week was not their best performance. They kicked poorly, which cost them, but even still, they probably would have lost anyway to Adelaide, because Adelaide played really well. They dominate territory, whereas North Melbourne are the worst team in territory battle. Both teams pretty good at clearances, but everything else just goes the way of the Bulldogs, and it's hard to see a world where they don't just tear North Melbourne apart. Bulldogs play Marvel Stadium really well. They get that overlap and run. They destroy teams at Marvel regularly, so you'd have to think this would be the same. However, they did lose to Hawthorn at Marvel earlier this year, which was really the start of Hawthorn's turnaround in their season. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but you'd have to think the Bulldogs win it. Predicted score says that they win it comfortably. I'd be surprised to see North Melbourne end up that competitive in this one, I guess. Obviously, it's a Sunday game, so we only have extended benches at the moment. But for the Bulldogs, named at the moment are Joel Fraser, Harvey Gallagher, Arthur Jones, Alex Keefe, Jack McRae, and James O'Donnell all coming in. At the moment, only 3 outs. There's a few more to go out, obviously, but they are Nick Caulfield, Tim English, and Riley Garcia. So big out in Tim English there. But overall, you'd think they'd be fine. North Melbourne, they've got one big out in Harry Sheasel. And coming in at the moment is Dylan Stevens, Zach Fisher, George Wardlaw, and Cullen Dawson. Bailey Scott playing his 100th game. Everything points the way of the Doggies. They should be able to bounce back. They're the hardest team in the competition to have any knowledge on, really, because they can go through spurts where they look like the best team in the competition by an absolute mile, and then they turn up and play like they did on the weekend. In fact, their last 2 losses have both been in Adelaide against the 2 South Australian teams. So, is it the end of the world? Probably not, but if they really want to take that next step, get into the top 4, which is going to be a struggle now. If they'd have won last week, they were a genuine chance. They can't be dropping games like they did last week. North Melbourne, they're just petering towards the end of the season. They're not guaranteed to finish 17th. Technically, they could finish 18th, but they would need Richmond to win and the percentages to swap around a little bit. they're also not going to go up to 16th because even if they won one, I can't see them passing the Eagles on percentage. So they're almost very likely to finish in 17th. So the game doesn't mean a lot other than just getting games into young people, trying out things, and maybe upsetting the Bulldogs season a little bit. Second game on Sunday is Hawthorn-Richmond. And this is a chance for Hawthorn to not officially lock in a final spot, but certainly put them very close. They win this one. It's going to take a bit of effort from another team to knock them out of finals, and the only ones that really could would be Essendon or Carlton, really, if they manage to win this one, and that's depending on what Essendon and Carlton do this weekend. Extended benches, nobody's been named out for either team yet, but for Hawthorn, Finn McGuinness, Jai Sarong and Josh Ward coming in. Harry Morrison playing his 100th game. For Richmond, Jack Ross, Matthew Coulthard and Jacob Blight named as ins. Obviously no outs yet, but we'll see what happens with that over the weekend. Hawthorn should be too good. They're just flying along. They were exceptional last week against Carlton. You take out a couple losses, like they lost to Geelong a few weeks back, which wasn't their best performance, but there's, I guess, not even from their second half of the year, from about round 9 or so, they've been outstanding consistently. It's crazy what a bit of confidence can do to a team, because they looked horrible first half of the season. I've been really thinking about it a lot, I guess, lately, about where this Hawthorn team is, how they've got to this point, and the more I look at it, the more it's just the team. It's they don't have players that are playing outstanding football. They don't have dominant players. They just play a team game, and consistently they have players that are just consistent. Really, it's from top of the list all the way down to the bottom. They all play their role week in, week out. They don't have like the bottom 4 players in a match. And that is huge, because obviously a lot of teams' top-end talent is all very similar. Like, obviously varies, I guess, a bit in terms of who's good and who's, like, the top 6 or so players in the comp and stuff. But overall, your top 10 players, it's all about your the bottom end of your team. They're staying healthy and they're playing consistent football, all of them. And it's easy as one of the lower ranked players in your team to play good when your team's playing good. Obviously, it's always going to be easier, especially, say, for a small forward or even a small back or anyone. If your team's playing well, you're going to get more opportunities, or as a backman, you're probably not going to have as much hard competition because your team's supporting you better. But it all goes hand in hand, and in the end, I think that's the biggest thing for Hawthorn is they play well as a team, every single one of them. They shouldn't lose this. If they lose this, they probably don't deserve to play finals, but I can't see a world where they do. They're just playing too good a football. Richmond have a bit of a run this year, quite a lot of games where they've been in them for 2.5 to 3 quarters and then just fall apart. I can see this game going that way, but I could also see Hawthorn winning it by 100 points. Richmond know their season's over. Hawthorn know that they've got everything on the line, so they're going to come out firing. You look down the list of those stats on the screen right now and you see where Richmond's at. There's not much good reading there. 18th points for, 17th points against, 18th accuracy, 16th points forward efficiency, 16th defensive efficiency. So pretty much across the board, they're in the bottom 3 teams for every stat and the bottom 2 for most stats. The only one they're not is stoppage clearances, but they're still only 13th. And those numbers could look even worse after this weekend. If Hawthorn get a hold of this one, it could turn into a blowout very quickly, because Hawthorn have been doing that. They did it to Collingwood. They did it to Carlton. They get on a run, they dominate the uncontested footy, and they just tear you apart. So it'll be it'll be interesting to see if the Tigers can stay with them for any amount of this game. But I can't see a world where they would be able to beat them. Final game of the week. Probably the most intriguing game of the week, to be honest. It's West Coast Carlton, Optus Stadium, Sunday afternoon, evening. Big game for Carlton. Not so big for West Coast, but it'll be interesting to see if they want to spoil Carlton's party or not, because obviously it will have ramifications for Fremantle, but I would imagine West Coast will be going out there to win this. They have no harm in winning games because they're not going to catch Adelaide Crows. Get some games into your young guys, give them a crack and see what they can do. Obviously extended benches at the moment. West Coast, Harry Edwards, Jack Petroselli, Jack Hutchinson coming in. No outs as of yet, but Jamie Cripps playing his 250th game. For the Blues, just hang with me here because this is a lot of outs. We'll start with the outs because there's some big names here and there's a lot of them. Out, all of these injured as well. Adam Sard, Harry Mackay, Jack Martin, Lockie Fogarty, Charlie Curnow and Jordan Boyd, all out in a crunch game. Yes, they're all injuries from last week, so it's not like they're making the choice to drop all these people in a crunch game, but that's a lot of people out for a big game. A team that was looking pretty healthy, all of a sudden really struggling. In comes Lewis Young, Jackson Binns, Cooper Lord, Jack Carroll, Corey Durden, Harry Lemmy, Billy Wilson, Ashton Moore, and Dominic Akui. A few of them are debutants. Obviously, not all of them are going to play. There's probably 3 of those, and 3 of the debutants probably not going to play. But there's 5 debutants named on the extended bench, which is insane. Ashton Moore, Billy Wilson, Dominic Akui, Cooper Lord, and Harry Lemmy all named as debutants. It'll be interesting to see what team they bring out, but it's going to be a tough game for the Blues all of a sudden to win because they've lost their 2 vocal points in the forward line in Charlie Curnow, Harry Mackay. They've lost some run and dash from the back line in Adam Sard. They've lost some small players as well in Fogarty and Martin, and even Boyd as well. So it's not going to be their normal game. It's those numbers that you see on the screen pretty much irrelevant because their forward line is completely different. Their back line and their ball movement changes a lot. Yeah, they still have their ruck, their midfield. So it's not like it's the end of the world. I guess they also have the benefit that I don't know. It's going to be tough for them. What does their forward line look like? At the moment, they've named Matthew Kennedy at full forward. Whether that's how it plays out, I don't know. But it's going to be a wild lineup, I guess, and a wild game plan because it's not going to be their normal football. Their season has got away from them over the last few weeks, and the injuries last week has really hurt them. They can still win this. They can still win both their last 2 games and make finals. Don't get me wrong. Like, their season's still well and truly alive. They probably need to win both games to play finals. Luckily for them, they're not top-ranked teams that they're going up against, so they're a chance. But this is a real danger game for them now. They've struggled of late. Season on the line, everything on the line here, and they need to go out there and just somehow eke out a win. It doesn't matter how bad it looks, how dirty of a game it looks. They just need to get the 4 points. Will they be capable? We'll wait and see. They're going to find out a lot about a lot of players, not just their big names, but also a lot of these debutants. They're going to find out where they are because they're just going to have to. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out on Sunday evening in what is a very intriguing match. That is all 9 games looked at. We'll have a look now at my tips for the weekend. First up, we've got Essendon sneaking over the line over Sydney. Sydney's form hasn't been great. Then we got Gold Coast easily taking care of Melbourne. Fremantle getting a little bit of an upset over GWS, who are in good form over in Sydney. Brisbane being too good for Collingwood, whose season's probably over. Before this point, technically not, but you never know. Port Adelaide to get the showdown victory over Adelaide. St Kilda sneaking over Geelong in another upset. Bulldogs being way too good for North Melbourne. Hawthorn being way too good for Richmond. And it does say, the numbers say, Carlton by 14. That is what I'm locking in as my tip here. But just letting you know, in my tipping competition, I may switch that around to West Coast. I'll see how I feel on Sunday once final teams and where we think Carlton are at. Because who knows what's going to happen in that game. That is an absolute bonkers game. A few more lopsided games, I think, this weekend than we've had. Certainly last week was a very tough week for tipping, and it turned out to be that way. I think there's a few games here that should go the way we think. Certainly the Gold Coast one, the Port Adelaide one, the Western Bulldogs and Hawthorn ones. I think the rest are all close, and who knows what will happen. But yeah, that's round 23, second last round of the year. Massive amount of on the line for all teams. Certainly in the top 10 or so teams. Also some of the other teams as well. It's going to be a cracking weekend of football. Don't forget to come back to wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Spotify or YouTube. Round 23 review episode will be out on Monday, wrapping up all of the round 23 action as we push towards the final game of the year and push towards finding out who's going to be playing in September in 2024. Also, don't forget to check out all my social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Thank you all for coming in. Don't forget to like, comment, and if you haven't subscribed already, why not? Click that subscribe button, join in. We've got plenty of content coming all the way through, not just August and September. We'll be still going in October. We're looking at plenty of stuff, team wrap-ups, all that sort of stuff. Heading into the off-season, we might also have a little bit of AFLW content coming your way as well. Thanks for tuning in. This is the All Aussie Rules podcast. This was episode 50. Thank you. See you on the next one.